Trump's detractors in the Philippines were delivering on their promise to host a wave of protests against the U.S. president even before he arrived on Sunday. Bigong Alyansang Makabayan New Patriotic Alliance, a mostly left-wing coalition of labor and peasant groups, launched the Ban Trump campaign, calling Trump's trip the worst aspect of U.S. imperialism. Bayan marched to the U.S. Embassy in the Philippine capital of Manila to deliver this message but were met by riot police who formed a tight barricade in front of the embassy. Read more. Philippines Rodrigo Duterte I will never visit lousy U.S. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and world peace as shown in the way he has carried himself as President of the United States, Bayan spokesperson Teddy Casino told DW. He has the lowest trust ratings and much like the Americans, we distrust Trump. He brings with him an agenda of war and plunder to countries in Asia, Casino added. Protesters pushed against the police to get past the barricade but were held back by security forces in full riot gear. I think there was restraint on both sides. There will be a series of protests throughout this week. We did not want to get off on a violent start, Casino said. Duterte once likened himself to Trump because they both cuss moral benchmark. Trump's Philippines visit is the last leg of his whirlwind 12-day trip to various Asian countries. The U.S. leader is attending a gala dinner in Manila on Sunday, honoring the 50th anniversary of Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN, and then he is meeting Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday for bilateral talks. Human rights advocates have hoped that Trump would speak out against the human rights crises brewing in Asia, from the Rohingya crisis to Duterte's war on drugs. In an interview earlier this week, Agnes Callamard, UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial or Arbitrary Executions at the UN's High Commission on Human Rights, said Trump could set a moral benchmark. Rodrigo Duterte's rise in Philippine politics began in the spring of 2016. He was considered an outsider in the presidential election, but he gradually gained popularity due to a radical election campaign that promised to free the Philippines from drugs and corruption. On May 9, 2016, Duterte was elected to the presidency with almost 40% of the total votes and a big lead over other candidates. As mayor of Davao, he had transformed the southern city from a mafia-run place into an economically prosperous area. However, human rights activists accuse him of using death squads and brutal force to achieve this goal. Duterte is known for his short temper. After coming to power, he threatened to break ties with the EU, the US and Australia. He also publicly insulted foreign leaders like Barack Obama because the former US president labeled Duterte's drug war as inhuman. Duterte also announced that his government would scale down dependence on the US and get closer to China and Russia. In July 2016, the Philippines won a lawsuit against China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague that rejected Beijing's territorial claims on the South China Sea. China refused to accept the court's ruling. Manila nevertheless celebrated it as a victory but remained cautious in its approach toward China due to its economic interests with Beijing. Leila de Lima, a senator and former director of the Philippine Human Rights Commission, has emerged as Duterte's most powerful opponent during his 1 year in power. She is leading a Senate probe into extrajudicial killings in Duterte's war on drugs. One of Duterte's most controversial decisions during his 1 year in power was to allow the former dictator, Ferdinand Marcos' body to be buried in Manila. Marcos had been denied this honor due to massive human rights violations during his reign. Human rights activists and church representatives held demonstrations against Marcos' hero's burial. In May, militant groups affiliated with the self-styled Islamic State group took control of the southern city of Marawi. Duterte declared martial law in Mindanao province and his forces have been trying to recapture the city for weeks. More than 200 people have been killed in the fighting and thousands have fled the town. Author Thomas Lachin SHS It is extremely important that President Trump or anyone else with that kind of stature uses their position in the global community to say and take a stand, Callamard said. But protesters at Friday's rallies were not optimistic. We are expecting Trump and Duterte to hit it off. Their political agendas will intersect. We are not expecting anything from Trump on the war on drugs except the token mention of respect for human rights which Duterte is already doing anyway, said Casino. Jigs Clamor, Deputy Secretary General of rights group Karapatan, told DW they do not welcome Trump's visit to the Philippines. It is hypocrisy on the part of the U.S. government to criticize human rights violations when it is supporting Duterte's war on drugs that has claimed the lives of mostly poor suspected illicit drug users and pushers. Citing U.S. Congress documents, Clamor said that the U.S. government allocated $9 million €7.7 million for the Philippines to support police training and infrastructure development. The money is now being used to fund the Duterte administration's brutally violent war against drugs, he noted, adding next year, the U.S. is allocating $111 million as military assistance to the country, with $7 million of that to be used for the country's anti-drug campaign. Biden launched the Ban Trump campaign, calling Trump's trip the worst aspect of U.S. imperialism, cut from the same political tapestry. The U.S. and the Philippines have a shared but not always happy history. The Philippines was a U.S. colony from 1898 to 1946, and the two countries have been close allies for decades. More than 3 million Filipinos live in the United States, representing the second-largest Asian ethnic group in the country. A 1951 mutual defense treaty binds the countries to protect each other if attacked, and the United States is the Philippines' biggest supplier of military hardware and arms. The long-standing relationship of the two countries was put to the test when Duterte assumed the Philippine presidency in 2016 and launched a bloody war on drugs that has left more than 3,000 suspected drug pushers dead. Smarting from Trump's predecessor Barack Obama's criticism of the drug war, echoing a global call to respect human rights and the rule of law, Duterte called Obama a son of a whore. He threatened to cut all ties to the U.S. and forge new diplomatic friendships with China and Russia. Duterte insulted Trump's predecessor Obama by calling him a son of a whore. That may change now, with President Trump seen as cut from the same political tapestry as Duterte, who has been labeled as Trump of the East, broken promises at another protest on Friday at Mendiola Peace Arch, a traditional staging ground for demonstrations. About 100 people from urban poor communities and student groups resisted an alliance between Trump and Duterte, citing the Philippine president's tendency to backpedal on his pronouncements and his promises. He said he would kick the Americans out of the Philippines. Why is Trump now coming here? Are we just being taken for a ride? Asked Australia Bagatbat, vice chairperson of Katame, a group representing the urban poor. Among the protesters were informal settlers whose homes were demolished about 3 weeks ago. Bagatbat said that the billions of pesos the Philippine government is spending over the visit of Trump and other world leaders could have been used to build homes and provide livelihoods for these people.